When writers sit down to write their novel, a lot of times what they think of is the big picture, right? We think of the plot. What are the scenes that are going to be in the plot? Who are the characters? What's the setting going to be like? And of course, that is how we start. That's what we want to focus on. But as we start to write the novel and we want to make it feel more real to the reader, and we want to create a story that really touches readers, we need to focus on the details, especially when we start to revise our novels. So I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about the details, adding details to your story, to your novel, to make it more interesting, more impactful to the reader.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
I want to welcome you to my channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte. I'm a women's fiction novelist, and I am here to give you some tips on writing. And today I'm going to focus on details because that is what gives your novel flavor. It gives it the voice and the tone and everything that readers read novels for. So anybody can tell a story just by describing the characters and telling us what the plot is, but how does one novel differentiate from another one? And it's usually the details that the author adds to the novel that gives it, again, the flavor, gives it the voice, and really, really attracts readers. And yet, what happens is that readers tend to focus, like I said, the big picture item. We focus on the characters and the plot and the setting. But if we don't give it the details, what we're doing is we're creating something that's very generic and that readers can't really connect with. And that becomes uninspiring to the reader. So let's talk about how to add those details and where in your novel to add the details. Let's talk first about description. Okay, so adding details to the description. So let's say that you have a character, your character has brown eyes. If you just say the character has brown eyes, that doesn't mean anything, right? About 70% of Earth's population have brown eyes. So the character really isn't picturing that. And I looked up like what kind of brown eyes do people tend to have? And these were just a few that came up. There's a lot more ways to describe it, but honey brown, so this would be like a light brown that has a little golden in there. Okay, so that helps us to see it. And you might not even say honey brown because maybe people might not really be able to picture that. They might, but maybe you just describe it, that the eyes are brown with some golden glint in it. I don't know. Cognac brown, so that's a little kind of with rusty undertones, or chestnut brown that are have some reddish hues to it. Russet brown, so it has more orangey, darker orangey brown colors. Chocolate brown, so we know what that looks like. Black brown, so almost black browns. But again, there's like different ways to describe it. I've heard people, and if you can tie those descriptions to something else in your novel, that makes it even better. So I've heard people describe like coffee colors, so coffee and cream color, or dark chocolate, dark coffee color. So and that would make sense. Let's say if you were talking about somebody who is a barista at a coffee shop, right? That would make even a better connection. But you want to use those details to describe because, again, that gives the reader an image. It gives them something to think about. What exactly does that look? What exactly does it look like? Same thing with like the shape of the eyes. There's, again, different types of shapes. So you might be saying, well, I don't want to spend 10 pages describing eyes. Well, you don't have to. It's not like you have to describe everything. But at some point, if you have like two lovers, right? And they're looking into each other's eyes, that might be a good place to actually describe what the eye looks like. What does it look like to that lover? It also depends on the character's mood and the way they feel about the character. So two people may be describing somebody's eyes differently, right? Depending on how they feel about a person. So for one, it might be a really beautiful golden, golden cognac color, golden honey color. And to another person, it might not be because they're not in love with this person. They're not looking at the details, right? Maybe they might just be cold brown eyes to someone else. But you want to add the details in there when it's appropriate because, again, you're bringing your reader in so they can see what you want them to see. So here's an example of putting the description and those details kind of in context with the story. So you're not just stopping the story and describing somebody's eyes, okay? So Susie stiffened when I mentioned that we could search for her long-lost sister. For the first time, I noticed the intriguing streaks of orange in her dark brown eyes. So you are describing it within the scene. Again, you're not just stopping everything to describe something, but you're adding those details in there as you're telling the story. And something else you don't want to do is you don't want to put a bunch of stuff, right? So I'm not going to stop my story and spend a paragraph or two paragraphs describing somebody's eyes, but I might have just that what I just read, and then later on maybe come back and talk about a different aspect of what I'm seeing in this person's eyes, so that it's not all at once, but by the time that first chapter, or by the time your story is done, they have a really good idea of what this person looks like, whether it's their eyes, whether it's, you know, their hair, whatever it is that you are choosing to describe for the reader. And what you don't want to do is to rely on cliches. So there's so many cliches out there on, you know, somebody's cold hard eyes is actually a cliche. I've seen it many times. Another one that I really don't like is the smile didn't reach her eyes or his eyes. And I read this in almost every single romance novel, and it really bugs me because I think, can you come up with something different? If you've seen it a million times, it's a cliche. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Describe it differently. Say something in a unique way. Say it in your own way with your own language so that it becomes your way of describing something, not just a cliche of the way it's been described a million times. All right, the second place where you want to add details is in the narrative itself. So adding details to description is kind of like, okay, yeah, we know that, right? We want to add those details, but a lot of times we forget that we want to add those details to narrative too, because narrative can be kind of boring. It's just kind of, it's almost like you're telling the story, right? So if we can add interesting details to that narrative, it makes it not boring. It makes it much more interesting. I was just reading a novel titled The Reliable Wife by Robert Coolrick. And it was interesting because this one little section I'm going to read to you, there's the main character, Ralph, and the story is that Ralph writes a letter to try to get a wife because his wife had died a long time ago, so he's been living alone. He wants a wife. It's almost in this like the early 1900s. So he wrote a letter to try to entice a woman to marry him and come. So this is the story in present time, right? But he thinks back to when he met his first wife. And his first wife was Italian, and he met her while he was at college. And he falls in love. He's infatuated with her almost immediately when he sees this first wife. So before this, this was his college life, right? He was drinking a lot, doing a lot of things that, you know, young college students do. So, but when he sees this woman that he thinks he's fallen in love with, he changes everything. So it shocked him to wake up every morning with a clear head, to find his room as neat as he left them his rooms as neat as he left them the night before, to taste the brilliant Tuscan food laid before him by the calm, dark-eyed servants. He exercised. He took boxing lessons. He took Italian lessons for hours every day from a university student, just so that he could speak to her. He rode and hunted and resolved to be the kind of man who could win the heart of a girl whose name he didn't know. Okay, so you can see the details there, right? The things that he does. So rather than the author telling us he fell in love with this Italian girl and he changed his ways, right? He no longer drank and he put his life back together again. That doesn't really give us those details. It doesn't tell us that paragraph that I read tells you exactly what he did, the changes that he made, how he becomes a new man because he wants to win this girl's heart. He doesn't want to be this sort of lazy guy who sits around and sleeps half the day, stays up all night drinking, leaves the mess all over his apartment. So he changes, right? And he gives us the details exactly of what he did. So that's an example of adding those details to narrative. Okay, the next place that you can add details is in dialogue. Now, dialogue's a little different, a little interesting, right? Because what happens with dialogue, people are talking, right? So one person says something, somebody else says something. So where do we add the details? And usually you don't want to have too many ways of describing the way somebody said something, right? So she said this angrily. That's not good writing. So we're better just saying he said, she said, but we can give details about what is happening as these people are speaking. So let's say that somebody said something that they said, I'm tired even, right? But that's not enough. Like she said, I'm tired, she said, but that doesn't give us an image. It doesn't give us the details. But if the person is sitting at the kitchen table, holding their head, their eyes are drooping, their voice is kind of slow, they're not animated, and we say this all, right? We explain all these details in there. That's going to paint the picture of the person being tired. Then they can even say, I'm so tired. But before the person even says that, the reader already sees that, right? They see how tired this person is. They can read those descriptions. You might have the person yawning, right? So that we get the image of the person and we understand that the person is tired without us having to say they're tired. The next place that we want to add those details is in the setting. So we look at the setting and we want to describe what something looks like. Then we can add details to bring this place to life. So if you think of a city, right? Think of New York, you think of Los Angeles, you think of Chicago, you think of all these different cities, Boston, they're all distinct, right? So they're not just a bunch of tall buildings. They're going to be different. They each have their own vibe. And so we want to describe those details of where exactly we are. New York City, for example, is going to smell differently, maybe than Boston. Boston, so New York, maybe we smell, I don't know, we might smell pizza on the street. We might smell bagels on the street. In Boston, I don't know, you might see a lot of people walking around with Dunkin' Donut coffee because it's big over there, or they might be doing something. So they're going to it's going to look different. Those details that you put in there are going to anchor the person in that setting. And remember that it's going to also be different for each person that visits. So the character is going to notice different things about the place. So two people could be in Boston, but notice different things about Boston and describe it differently and have different details. Same thing. So let's say that you're in a forest. A forest in California is going to look different, feel different than a forest in Maine, for example. The trees might be closer together. There may be peculiar burn marks or insects or birds that only exist in that part of the country. And again, we want to make it specific to your character. The character might go or walk past a coffee shop every day or a bookstore every day, and it smells like old pages and coffee, right? So it could be unique to what that character notices. It doesn't have to be this bookstore, might be only in one place. It might only be in Boston. It might only be in this whatever city they're in, right? So it's going to be different. So the reason that we want to add these details to our story is not just to embellish your story. It's not just to add pages to your story or to make the reader read some boring description or detail, right? That's not the point. The point is to bring your reader in. You want to make your novel unique. You want your characters to have some kind of dimension. You want to transform your setting into a place that characters feel like or the reader feels like they're walking into this place that you are describing and that you're giving details about. The key here is that you want to go beyond the surface description, the surface details, to describe specific things, to make your story more evocative and to make it more meaningful. So these details are not just enhancing your story, but they're actually making your story, your novel, unforgettable. So remember to add those details to your story. If you don't have them there after your first or second draft, go back and add them in as you are revising, whether it's your third, your fourth, your 10th draft. You want to go through and add those details to your story. I hope that I've convinced you and that you will do this in the future. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and come back and see me next week.